Welcome to Implicating the Real. Today's show is part 2 of the conversation began in the previous episode. Let's get right into it. Hope you enjoy.
So page 20, I had one about, there's this quote that says, you exist, because you is underlined. It's on the bottom of 20. There are no real barriers to separate the systems of which I speak. So we're talking about the different levels. The only separation is brought about by the varying abilities of personalities to perceive and manipulate. You exist in the midst of many other systems of reality, for example, but you do not perceive them. And even when some event intrudes from these systems into your own three-dimensional existence, you are not able to interpret it, for it is distorted by the very fact of its entry. I just wanted to ask you, what do you think these other systems could be that we are in the midst of?
I think he later hints at I don't know if it's our dreams or our emotions, but they kind of almost terraform these other dimensions. There's parts of our psychological being that just exist as the environment for other dimensions.
Right. So we're doing something analogous to kind of what Seth's doing, but just to other smaller, lower level dimensions.
Well, I don't know if they're necessarily smaller, but possibly. But if you think of the way we've understand a volcano through our history, just different, cultures. So they're often giving it a name, they're personifying it, and it's angry. It's and we think it's a very primitive way of thinking, but I think that's kind of what he's talking about. These energies are protruding. And what I thought by this port is distorted by the very fact of entry. That's my conception of if aliens come into our dimension, they're just coming through the uterus just like everyone else. I think there's some people that I've met that are oh man, you're from another galaxy,
right? You're totally 100% human being, but man, whatever's going on inside that brain case, it is different.
But that's what I think of when he's saying distorted by the very fact of entry. I think he's implying that again, we're in the realm of idealism, but an alien isn't gonna travel, and he gets to this later, but it's he's it's totally impractical for you to build a spaceship and fly these galaxies where you can just travel astrally, like you're saying. That is actually how things will be happening when if and when those days come where we're making contact with other intelligences at our level.
Yeah, I think of the idea that we are in a 3D matrix, right? So it's if something wants to intrude on the physical reality, presumably it would have to take on some sort of physical form.
It's the rules of the game that we were talking about last week. You can't get in the game without adopting the rules of the game. We just wouldn't see it otherwise.
Yeah, it reminds me of the idea of the color out of space, type thing. Or I haven't read that book. It's this idea. It's the short story of there's this alien color that's indescribable, and this guy sees it, and it's the alien being is the color. It exists as a color instead of as some other thing.
Interesting.
I haven't read it, so I can't explain it well, but there's a similar thing that Philip K. Dick talks about, when he had his extraterrestrial experience.
I don't know about this.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So apparently he got visited by this alien intelligence that calls itself Valis, which is the variable something living something system.
Oh, it's an acronym?
Yeah, it's an acronym. And it describes itself as a similar thing where it's this large consciousness system. But the way it originally makes contact with him is that it beams a beam of pink light into his brain.
Whoa.
And he describes this incredibly vivid pink light that hits him in the head. And it's that was always interesting to me, that it's well, if you're interdimensional, why do you have to shoot a beam of light, But it's that idea of well, you're still in a three-dimensional space, even if you're intruding from another space. So you have to you got to play by the rules a little bit,
Yeah, because whatever's happening here, whether it's, physical or mental, like we're just not going to react to anything that isn't on this wavelength.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe we can have a Philip Dick episode. That would be fun.
Yeah, I feel like we got to have a few like offshoot episodes because there's so much stuff that is interesting to look at through a Sethian perspective. I feel.
Yeah. What were we talking about? Oh, the you exist. Yeah, and then there's the systems that we, sort of terraform, like you're talking about. Like, to me, that sort of speaks to this really interesting idea about like our creative endeavors, because Seth talks about like what it's doing is sort of its creative endeavor, where it's like, in some sense, when we make mythologies or we write stories or like, we act out, different characters, it's like, in some sense, is there sort of a dimension in which those characters are having their own experiences,
Right.
So my friend group is into tabletop wargaming, right? It's like when we sit down and move our little plastic figures on the table and we imagine all these crazy things happening and there's like this epic story to all the people running around and these characters have heroic and tragic things happening. Is there a world in which that's actually happening, and are we the ones that are sort of facilitating it,
Right. And then that's also the age-old question of like, is life imitating art or art imitating life? Are you like in your dreams, are you tuning into that world and then like emulating in that in your play in the game?
Right,
Or
exactly.
both. And it might actually be both, I kind of want to say. But
Yeah. Did I bring this up last episode? The idea of like, I think role players get this a lot, where if you role play a character for long enough, you sort of start thinking separately from them.
Right.
Like the way that you were talking about before, where like it sort of gets its own free will.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before, just not on microphone, unfortunately.
Right. Maybe I can explain a little, but like, I think people who, if you play a lot of tabletop role-playing games, like I play a lot of D&D and Pathfinder and stuff, like if you end up playing a character for like a year, 2-3 years at a time, right? Like eventually you start thinking as the character and you start thinking like, oh, I would like to do this thing, but I know the character won't,
Yeah. And so like when Seth is talking about, he gets this like right at the end, maybe they can create other consciousnesses, but they don't take this lightly, or they don't do this lightly. And I remember when you were talking about your character, like, did you want him to die or something, or did he want to die?
Yeah, where it's like, I was sort of getting the feeling, like the impression of like, this guy has done he's had his narrative arc, he's done everything he needs to do in life, and it's like, I can feel his death coming. Like he yearns for his death. He doesn't consciously do it, but that his death needs to come sometime soon.
So that's value fulfillment. And I think like my experience of just like looking at life is like, that's when people like get sick and die. Or like if anyone listener is familiar with like Viktor Frankl, like he's this Jewish psychologist that survived Auschwitz. And his books, or at least one of them, is about like watching how other people did or did not have meaning in their life and how that affected their ability to survive. Like the most horrific conditions, like almost impossible to survive on like the caloric intake that they were given. And yet some people like just had to see their daughter again.
Right.
They persisted, and other people like couldn't survive like 3 days.
Yeah, the idea that the hopelessness is what ended up being fatal to a lot of people.
But it's that value fulfillment. And it's like, this is why I always get upset with like boiling down the meaning of life to survival. Like, survival isn't, we're not here to survive. We're surviving for something.
Right.
And that something in Seth's concept is value fulfillment. And so your character, like,
he already accomplished
he did everything.
Yeah.
And he's like, and at that point you're like, okay, I want the next thing. Like, I gotta like, to make your exit from this world, like you have to die.
And I think in human life, we think about it that way too, right? Where like, there's the insight that I think people achieve, as they become older in life, that like the theme of death being necessary for life to be meaningful, that like there needs to be this period put on the end of your story. And like, the fact that it gets wrapped up in this, appropriate way, like finding an appropriate exit is sort of reflectively makes the rest of it more meaningful,
Yeah, like I've thought about this a fair bit in the context of like, oh, I chose to be here. Oh, I'm creating my own reality. And then you're like, yeah, would I want to live forever in this dimension and this particular person? Probably not.
Right.
And one thing that I feel is kind of fun and playful is to like try to hold both of these ideas at the same time. I think all of us, if we think about it, we've had the experience of like experiencing life as being too short and too long.
Yeah.
And try to hold both of those at the same time.
Well, I don't know if I can agree with the second one. Maybe that's just other people. I don't know if I've ever felt like life's been too long.
Really?
I'm one of those people where
I don't feel that way either. But like you have these specific like, you're at work and you just can't wait for the clock to get to this point.
Right.
Like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's it's a micro example of it, but I think that's kind of what I'm getting at.
True. That's true. I suppose the experience of like real suffering does feel like that, right? Where you're like, you start getting the like, woe is me, like, was I born simply to suffer like this?
Yeah, and like,
yeah.
I'm more with you. Like, I don't really have a lot of those experiences. I'm really like enjoying myself, and I feel like I have more to do than I have time to do it. But I know I have had these perspectives, and like it's interesting trying to hold both at the same time, and then you can kind of decide, well, like maybe it is just the right amount of time.
Yeah.
And this gets back to, and it's actually in this chapter, but we talked about it last time, the room feeling smaller, and then it actually gets smaller. But like, if we lived, let's say like a year was longer than a year,
Right.
like we wouldn't know. Like if like the earth rotation and everything relative like slowed down, would we really know?
I think listeners can probably empathize with that a lot, because I think that happens often in people's lives, where I can think of a couple years of my life that feel like they were 5 years.
Yeah.
Just because of the amount of things that happen.
Absolutely. And I think if we skip around a little bit more, Seth talks about like his experience of time is like that. We experience time, or what you would call its equivalent nature, in terms of intensities of experience, psychological time with its own peaks and valleys.
Mm-hmm.
And what I get by that is like, so he doesn't experience our time, and he often says like, relative to our conception of time, he doesn't experience time at all.
Yeah.
But he experienced these intensities. And I get that it's kind of like having the dream that seems to last for like, in the dream, it's like a month long. And then you wake up and it was only like 2 hours.
Yeah.
Seth is at a place where his ability, his bandwidth to experience is so big where like he can take that offshoot and it's all there in the moment point.
It's the moment point, right?
Yeah.
I love the moment point.
Yeah.
It's such a cool idea.
I mean, a lot of our listeners might be familiar with like the pop cultural reference to Roy, the video game in Rick and Morty.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Where he sits down and plays this video game and he like lives this whole life as like a carpet salesman or something.
Yeah.
Roy, and then Rick gives Marty shit because he like beat cancer and then went back to the carpet store.
Yeah.
Like, what were you thinking?
What were you thinking, man?
So he plays this whole game, lives this whole life, and then like it only takes like an hour.
Yes.
Their time.
Just like a few minutes or something. Yeah. No, I love the idea of the moment point. Like if we can pivot to it.
Yeah. I have, a fair amount of experience in like psychedelics, and like my experience of like realizing that time is more of intensity than just like something a clock measures, or I don't even know how you would define it in those terms. It'd be interesting. I don't know. Do you have any like Western philosophical ideas of definitions of time? That's
Well,
in the spot.
I mean, if we really want to get into it, like, I think the current scientific worldview is sort of with Einstein, right? That time is sort of this, changeable thing. There are rules to it, but that the rules allow it to get bent in a lot of ways,
Yeah. This is kind of where I was going too. Like, so like in those psychedelic experiences, it was kind of similar to the Roy thing or the dream thing, where it just like, it seemed like so many hours are passing by, and then you look at the clock and it was like 45 minutes.
Right.
But what I think is an easy way to understand what might be happening is like if we think of like frame rates in film,
Sure.
there's like every second there's like 30 frames or whatever it is. And you could fill it with more, but like there's a point where like we just don't perceive it
Yeah.
because our own perception is just at this rate.
Like our nerves have a frame rate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like if you're increasing the intensity, you're increasing your ability to take in more information.
Yeah. And I think people can understand that experience really well if you've ever been in some sort of like accident or, some kind of stressful situation. Like the couple times I've been in car accidents or near a car accidents, right? Like time slows down a lot.
Yeah.
Like you're really in control in a short period of time, like it's crazy how slow time goes when you're in those kind of things.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, the obvious answer is, right, like if you ask any, scientist or something, they'd probably tell you it's an evolutionary, mechanism that like the animals that can perceive that much quicker are going to be the ones that survive dangerous situations,
And yeah, and I see how they get to that explanation. I think the Sethian point of view is like maybe your higher self like understands this is like an important moment that it might have to like intervene a little bit or like
Right.
give you the energy you need to like perceive this situation and react as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And then like we have like, our science would say like, oh yeah, adrenaline kicked in.
Yeah.
Their explanation would be like your own physical mechanism recognized this and gave your like self this chemical injection, and that therefore you were able to like act in this way. But like I think the Sethian perspective would be like that all happened because of the psychological part that was actually the cause of all that.
Right, that your reality is actually more rich in that moment than it otherwise would be. There is more like vividness in the world at that moment, so it takes you longer to explore that vividness,
Yeah, and like the adrenaline and all that was just like the physical corollary of that psychological happening.
But either way, I think like the takeaway that like this time thing, this like experience of time really is very perceptual and individually determined,
Yeah. So in the same way that I like have gained a lot of like knowledge through studying emotions with Seth, and I feel like I just have this gut feeling that there's like so much more that I want to unpack. The same thing is there with time, and like we were just talking about, we feel more like we don't have enough time, or life is going too fast, and so that is actually where the rubber meets the road, or like what I am struggling with. And I think Seth has things to say about that, like people that feel like there aren't enough hours in the day, like that becomes its own kind of pathology. And like to some extent I'm suffering from that, and like getting some help from Seth.
Yeah.
And part of it is just like not worrying so much.
Can you go further into that? Like what's been helpful sort of?
Well, like I have multiple like writing projects happening, and like my way of conceptualizing like gaining momentum is just like cutting out more things in my life and dedicating more time to those projects so they get done faster.
Right.
He's kind of enlightened me to this idea that like that's not necessarily how it works. And like by taking that approach, I'm actually like psychologically imbalanced, that it's actually like slowing me down. He's saying like, if it's like, if I would take a walk or a break, or if I would just like balance out my other needs in my life, that like the quality of my writing time will supersede the quantity that I'm giving.
Yeah.
And it's something like I couldn't take at face value at the beginning, but I was willing to play around with. And the more I play around with it, the more I'm kind of thinking there's something to it.
Yeah. That seems like it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
That like your creative, capacity needs this kind of interaction with the world to be able to operate at full, functioning.
Yeah. And we're such a production obsessed culture too. So like part of it is just getting out of that.
Right. Where you're not focused on like, oh, I'm not making full use of my productive hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like all this is to say that like my eyes are opening and I feel like there's still like a big leap that I need to take to like fully put this into practice. But I'm excited at the prospect, and I've had some good results already, kind of like opening up to this way of doing things.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And I think, to the extent that that's true, that's something a lot of us, including our listeners, are going to be interested in. Okay. Yeah, maybe we're kind of right there. He says, my environment changes constantly, but then so does your own. And then that's when he goes into the room example. For example, if a room suddenly appears small and cramped to you, you take it for granted that this change of dimension is imaginative and that the room has not changed regardless of your feelings. And then, we talked about that last week, but I think these next few sentences are kind of illustrative. The fact is that the room under such conditions will have changed quite definitely and in very major respects, even though the physical dimensions will still measure the same. The entire psychological impact of the room will have altered. Its effect will be felt by others besides yourself. It will attract certain kinds of events rather than others, and it will alter your own psychological structure and hormonal output. You will react to the altered state of the room, even in quite physical ways, though its width and length, inches or feet, may not seem to vary.
Yeah. And then Seth says, like, I've instructed you to underline seem because it's just seeming. It only seems not to vary. Yeah.
Right. But I think we kind of touched on that, but I thought it was helpful to like get Seth's own words on that. Like the entire psychological impact will have been altered.
Yeah. And I can quibble with like some parts of it, but I think the broad strokes of it seem reasonably true. Like, you like, there's that experience of like you walk into a room and like, there's like tension. Like you can feel the static. Like maybe you don't know like why people are mad at each other or what's going on, but you can just like immediately have the impression of like, oh, there's like bad vibes going on. Like somebody did something that I'm not aware of,
Well, I wonder if that would even be the telepathy that we were talking about too.
Right. Yeah.
But it's the idea of like our consciousness underneath the hyper focus of these physical senses is aware of other things, and through our intuitions we have access to those to that information. And it's just because our narrow beliefs in what physical reality is that we don't give them the validity, and therefore we just have like these like fringe concepts where like they're just weird experiences that aren't really mean anything.
They're not validated by our current like worldview.
It even like puts the people that do believe in those things kind of in a bad spot because their way of explaining them is a little, I don't know, it's dismissible by the mainstream culture, right?
And there's that thing where there's like a lack of vocabulary because it's not legitimized. And like, I think that happens so often with like different like ways of viewing the world where like a lack of necessary vocabulary gets taken as a reason for this thing to be dismissed or to be seen as like a lesser form of thought, or that's really not the case. It's just that, it's coming from a different historical place and it needs to be able to like explicate its concepts a little better,
It's interesting, yeah, like how much certain words or vocabulary like lend power or validity to concepts.
Right, exactly, yeah. And that just really comes out of like the dogmatic way that like knowledge usually gets like passed around or like verified.
Yeah. I mean, that's a total tangent, but like to like just think about like, language is organic and like usage like dictates the terms. Like we have so many examples of that, but like I always get upset when like, there's like a cool like adjective or something, and then like some drug company like takes it and like names their like hemorrhoid cream after it,
right,
and just adds a few extra like letters at the end. It's like you just ruin this fucking word.
You just ruined this word I like. So you were talking about like how this experience has to do with sort of this intuitive, like this intuition, right? This intuitive way of understanding, and how that's different from everything else. Is that kind of what Seth says the internal versus the external sense is? Is the internal sense like basically intuition? Is that one way we could talk about it?
I think he gets way more specific on what the inner senses are, and I think they're in this book, and we'll get to them. But like I think what he says is like our way of understanding them, our word would be like the intuition.
The intuition. Okay.
Yeah, and other places also he gets into this. I really like this idea that the intellect and the intuition need to be partners, because it seems like our camps of like academia or spirituality, like they both kind of like fall into this like, oh, one has to displace the other.
Right.
But the idea that they're partners, almost analogous to like the horse and rider emotion thing, like is really powerful to me, I think. And I think he has a lot to say about that. So we'll have to find some stuff like that.
Yeah, that's very interesting to me. Like the idea of like intuitionism, you know?
Yeah.
Did we explain the room example enough, you think?
I think we touched on it a few times, unless you have more that,
No.
like a quibble or like, I do welcome your quibbles, Joe. And
the quibble's the same one as last time.
I think, they'll be interesting to see like both like our ability to explain it in Sethian terms and like understand this. And like, if we do this long enough, it'll be interesting to see like if our minds change, with some of these ideas.
I guess the other one that's not a quibble is I really like that Seth talks about like altering the state of the room will alter the kind of events.
Yeah.
It will, what's the exact thing? It will
attract certain kinds of events rather than others.
Attract certain kind of events rather than others. It's got like sort of like a fun like feng shui thing to it,
Yeah.
Where it's like, I think about like a prime example would be like sanctified spaces like churches, And this idea that they, by creating kind of psychological atmosphere, they become a place where certain actual physical events are more prone to happen,
Yeah. There's some connection with like the psychological energy and the physical space that like it creates an energy about it or something.
And I think that like people really can feel that. Like if you walk into a place that's considered holy or sacred, like there is sort of like an energy to the air that you can sort of experience like walking into one.
Well, Seth has these things called coordination points. He talks about places on Earth that have like this. So he's telling us that we're creating our own reality, but these coordination points are places where I think it's where like the Earth lines up with like other dimensions. But anyways, what ends up happening is like our ability to create reality is like energized at these points. And apparently he mentions Minneapolis specifically. I mean, he mentions like the whole like West Coast and parts of the East Coast. And then he says like the Great Lakes area, but like he's just naming off all these places. But when I think back of like George Floyd and like all these things, like, there's just like such like global instant like energy here. It's like, there's like gas in the air. So like any spark is just going to take off. We create our reality, good or bad, a little more quicker on these coordination points.
Interesting. Is that like does that connect with like the pyramids type thing? If we're like talking about other space alien stuff?
It might, or like some of those ideas. I don't know if I'm like super familiar, but like, are the pyramids supposed to be like on a specific?
Yeah, they're supposed to be on like a specific like energy vortex or whatever you want to call it.
Probably along those lines.
Yeah.
Anyways, I just handed you that book because it's like a whole book about events.
Michael just handed me a book that says it's called The Individual and the Nature of Mass Events, and it's another Seth book.
Maybe someday we'll like really get into it.
Yeah, we can get into that as well. Okay, I've hammered on the room enough, I guess. I have so many.
We can always come back to it. We can have like a recurring segment. The room.
The room. It's like Twin Peaks. It's like Twin Peaks, The Room.
I haven't seen that forever. I'm like lost in all these references because I'm so old and watched things so long
ago. A pretty old show, Michael. I don't know.
Well, there's 2 versions of it, right?
Oh, there is the new seasons. Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So on 23, there was one thing that's stuck out to me that I thought was kind of like fun and cute. It says, whole consciousness adopts various forms. It need not always be within a form. All forms are not physical ones. Some personalities, therefore, have never been physical. They have evolved along different lines, and their psychological structures would be alien to your own. To some extent, I also travel through such environments. Consciousness must show itself, however, it cannot unbe. It is not physical. It must therefore show its activation in other ways. In some systems, for example, it forms highly integrated mathematical and musical patterns that are themselves stimuli for other universal systems. There's a lot there, but I love that part at the end where it's like this idea of a consciousness that exists in like a mathematical formula, or a consciousness that exists inside of a piece of music, you know?
Yeah. It always makes me think of like, I don't know where this quote comes from, but like, do people have ideas or do ideas have people?
Right.
Or like to the extent when you're talking about your role-playing character, like, does that character live in its own dimension, or is your imagination like where it lives?
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah, like, is my imagination the dimension that it lives in?
But like, if you like partition off just that imagination, is that consciousness like experiencing it as itself? You know, and the
Like,
way
is it self-aware?
in the way we're like supposedly cut off from our broader self, like, is that happening on that level?
Right, like, what if I create a monk character that's a Gnostic and it achieves gnosis? Does my entire mind enter into the D&D realm, you know?
Or yeah, like his enlightenment is just realizing he was you.
That he was on a
and
paper the
imagination
entire
was
time.
you.
Yeah, exactly. He goes insane and becomes a doomsday prophet because he says, "The session is going to end, they're out of Doritos." Like,
Yeah.
it makes me think too of, because you've read a decent amount of, Kundera, right?
A little bit.
you-
Again, a long time ago.
Have you read Immortality?
Yeah, I think so.
He plays a lot with that in Immortality, right? Because there's a part where Kundera writes himself as a character in Immortality who knows that he's a character being written by himself.
Okay, maybe I haven't read that one. I definitely have it up there on the shelf, but like everything is just
Yeah. Where he's writing the story and there's like a certain like moment where he's in the story, like sitting and having coffee with one of the characters. And he's like almost has to let himself intervene in the story, but not in a way of rewriting the story, but like in being in the story, intervening in it, you know?
yeah.
It's this kind
I'm
of
really
beautiful
attracted
idea.
to those sort of meta narratives, and
But the
they
other
can
thing,
get kind of cliche, but
they can get a little
yeah.
cliche. But the other thing that I found really provocative about it is he has this ongoing theme where he talks about the same way you're talking about, do ideas live in people? His idea is like gestures living in people,
Gestures.
like physical gestures.
Hmm.
Like the book starts with like this woman like throwing her hand up in the air, you know, as if to throw a ball into the air. And he talks about this beautiful moment of witnessing it and understanding that that gesture is a universal gesture that like women make when they're in a certain mood, and how there are less gestures in the world than there are people. And so it's not that people have gestures, it's that gestures become instantiated in people, you know?
So like every person that makes that gesture is like another instantiation of
this
the gesture
gesture.
that's like has its own like unity and identity.
Right, and the identity of it is this sort of like emotional content that the gesture is, where it is self-contained in itself, this emotive idea.
I kind of want to say that like Seth says that, you know, like everything is action and consciousness like wants to have all experiences. And that includes like partitioning all these focuses off and having like these separate like, and that's where you get into like, what is a plane? Is it a cat? Is it this like astral dimension? You know, like, or and
Is it the middle finger? Like, am I living as the middle finger symbol, right? Like,
yeah. Oh man.
are we at the part where Seth talks about like being a tree for a while? I love that part too.
We can be.
Well, because I feel like that goes along with what we're saying, where Seth talks about sometimes these like higher dimensional beings go on vacation and they decide, you know what would be really restful is if I was just a tree for like 20 years. Let me just like exist as a plant.
Yeah, what was that page? Okay, yeah, I found it. It's on 21. For our vacations, we visit amid quite simple life forms and blend with them. To this extent, we indulge in relaxation and sleep, for we can spend a century as a tree or an uncomplicated life form in another reality. We delight our consciousness with the enjoyment of simple existence. We may create, you see, the forest in which we grow. Usually, however, we are highly active, our full energies focused in our work and in new challenges. The idea that like that level of being enjoys rest or a version of it.
Yeah.
And it makes me think, to the extent we were talking about earlier, like the terraforming thing, like our energies are always like contributing to something according to Seth. Like, and so like even in their form of rest, they're this majestic tree in a forest in another dimension or something.
Yeah. It just made me think like how broad the concept of consciousness here is, where like these are all things that consciousnesses are doing, but like existence as a tree or existence as a piece of music, like those are very different kinds of experiences, if they can be experiences, so it's like the idea that there needs to be sort of this internal perspective of all of these things, like everything has this internal perspective. It's sort of, to do more name dropping in this section, it sort of reminded me of Schopenhauer's panpsychism, where there's like, there is an internal side to everything, even, art, even a forest has like, not just the external, like perceptible, like trees and stuff, but there's sort of, hey, what it is to be a forest,
Yeah, if everything is consciousness, then we have to like start to like project this idea of just these different unimaginable experiences. Like we can't quite imagine what it's like to be a tree or a bug or a piece of grass.
Yeah.
But it has value to say that we can't quite imagine it. Like to hold space for how strange it could be, how unique it could be.
Right. Rather than simply saying it can't be, you're just saying it could be, but I can't even imagine it.
Yeah, like we have to anthropomorphize it a little bit just to even imagine it. But like I like holding it open and to, everything is kind of like a strange mystery, strange, beautiful mystery. The thing I like to think about in these contexts too is that like, like we need trees in this world.
Mm-hmm.
And like, we need cells and we need accountants, and they're like all these things. Like I don't want to do that or that or that.
Yeah.
But like I need to be in an environment that has that. And it's like, it's beautiful that like this idea, this is also a Sethian idea, but like everything is pursuing its own value fulfillment on every level. So like the cell wants to be a cell, the tree wants to be a tree. And they all fit together where like all this other life can flourish and use them for their needs too. And that probably gets to like the terraforming, where like our energies from our dreams or whatever are like going into another existence. Like these are all like just puzzle pieces. It's just this flourish, this endless flourish of consciousness.
Yeah. It has sort of like ecological sort of like parallels to it, where like everything sort of can have its own niche, but like together they make sort of this symphony, to mix metaphors.
Yeah, no.
Where they're all together in doing their own thing, but then in concert with one another are becoming this other thing.
Yeah, I think symphony is a good word because it speaks to the complexity and the harmony, like those two things specifically.
So to go with this panpsychist thing, would you say like, the question I had with it is, you have this idea that there's these internal consciousnesses to like various different types of things, but there's also this idea that my consciousness is creating whatever I perceive. So does that mean that like only quote unquote living things have internal consciousness? Like I'm not creating, for example, like Seth talks about their cat, right? Being its own universe inside of itself. That means that Jane and Robert aren't making the cat by perceiving it, The
Right.
cat's making itself.
Yeah, but they're creating their reality, which includes the cat. It's like,
okay,
it's like a shared reality in that sense. Like we're all creating, every consciousness is creating its own reality, but like to the extent, and this is going back to like Seth talking about, he's with like-minded people that based on their values and challenges that they want to meet.
Yeah.
I think the cat fits into, if I have a cat, it fits into my life to the extent that, and this gets into all the probabilities and the free will. Like if everything has its own free will, there has to be infinite probabilities for everything to always be in like consent with each other and the shared reality. That's our show, but fear not, the never-ending conversation continues next week. If you're enjoying the show, please be so kind as to subscribe, like, rate, and review, and if you're feeling frisky, tell a friend. Contact us at implicatingthereal@gmail.com. You can support the show at patreon.com/implicatingthereal. We are doing our best, but whatever support you can lend helps us appreciably. We are not affiliated with the publishers or proprietors, but we encourage you to get the books. You can follow along as we endeavor to dive deep into the Sethian worldview, and there's really nothing like cultivating your own relationship with the material. Until next week, we wish you a fun good evening.